What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are covering the story where Miles Morales' Spider-Man returns to the Ultimate Universe, because this is Spider-Man Incursion. So the idea behind this story is that this initially picks up with Miles in the main Marvel Universe. We'll make sense of his returning to the Ultimate Universe here in a second, but what goes on here is he actually kind of muses to himself and really is just talking to his journal. And he talks about the idea that he used to fear change, right? He says, it's been a long journey, but I'm finally at a place where I feel like I can adjust to whatever life throws at me. Is that wild to say? It feels wild to say. I've had so much thrown at me recently, but I've been able to mostly handle it as best I can. The crazy thing is, I used to fear change, though I guess that after what I've been through, I've just gotten used to it. And so initially, it jumps back to the ending of Secret Wars, when Molecule Man Owen Reese basically tells Spider-Man that he owes him a favor for bringing him a cheeseburger. Now, for those of you guys who think that statement is absolutely insane, yes, it does sound insane, and I recognize that as I say it. But the idea behind this was that at the end of Secret Wars 2015, because of the fact that Molecule Man had always talked about the idea that he was hungry, kind of an on-running joke with his character, Miles has a cheeseburger in his pocket that he gives to him. And so in response to that, when the main Marvel Universe was restored by the actions of Reed Richards, Miles Morales shows up in the main Marvel Universe, and he's basically been there ever since. What ends up happening is that Molecule Man restores his mom. He brings back Rio. And so in a lot of ways, Miles' life was complete. What's interesting about this is what he continues to say. A part of me knows that I've lost something, everything, but that I was given a second chance. I know I'm from someplace else, another universe. It's just the details are fuzzy. Now, here's an important thing to understand. Yes, Earth 6160 is the new Ultimate Universe in Marvel Comics. Ultimate Universe 2.0 is what some people have taken to calling it. The original is Earth 1610, as some of you guys may or may not remember. For Miles, and specifically for that original Ultimate Universe, it's gone now, right? There really is no bringing it back in Marvel. They've kind of written it out. Brian Michael Bendis did try to bring it back a couple times, and in fact, it was revisited in Donny Cates' run on Venom. But the fact is, Marvel's just sort of discarded the whole thing. And so 6160 is the main focus. That's kind of what Miles is talking about, the idea of him losing everything. His entire universe is gone, and it has been since Secret Wars, really the collapse of the multiverse and Avengers and New Avengers. But one of the things that had happened as part of the launch of Ultimate Universe 2.0 is that the Maker, who comes from that reality, had visited Miles Morales, and in knowing that they both came from the original Ultimate Universe, he actually extended Miles an olive branch, asked him if he wanted to come back with him. And Miles says, even though I don't remember much, I knew that I couldn't trust him, the Maker. And so the Maker had given him a card and said, if you ever change your mind, then you can find me. Now, the card was blank, but obviously it was some kind of technology where the Maker would just be able to summon him if Miles ever decided that he wanted to come along. But what Miles says is that ever since the Maker showed up, he feels like something's off, like there's some secret trying to crawl its way out of his head. A voice that says maybe the offer to join him in a new universe was not all smoke, that maybe there's something there that can fill a void that Miles didn't know he had. Now again, this kind of hits on the idea, Miles doesn't remember the universe he comes from, or at least all the details of the universe that he came from. And so that's why he says, but then I spend an extra 5 seconds thinking about it and feel stupid for ever doubting myself. Now, of course, what ends up happening is his younger sister, Billie, basically attracts the attention of the card in the trash can. And when that happens, she's whisked away to the new Ultimate Universe. And in turn, Miles jumps through. Now, for a lot of you guys who are familiar with Spider-Man stories, right off the bat, this is very reminiscent of both Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. For those of you guys who don't know about that, Spider-Man was the first time that Miles Morales in the original Earth 1610 Ultimate Universe first met Peter Parker in the main Marvel Universe. And it was basically Brian Michael Bendis kind of giving the middle finger to people who didn't like Miles Morales and essentially telling them he's here to stay. And he kind of wrote that into the story when Peter Parker from the main Marvel Universe gave Miles his blessing, and from that point forward, Miles was Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe. Fans eventually warmed up to him, and Miles has been around ever since. But at this point, Miles doesn't know where his sister is. And so following that, you switch over to Manhattan in Earth 6160, the new Ultimate Universe, and you pick up with Peter and Venom. Now, one of the things to know, and the big speculation, is that this takes place between Ultimate Spider-Man issues 17 and 18. At the time right now that I'm recording this video in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, of course, Peter Parker Spider-Man, as you would expect, but his son is Venom. Venom isn't really an official name that he's adopted at this point. It's kind of a fan name that's been given to him because of the striking similarity between Peter Parker in the main Marvel Universe in Secret Wars 1984 when he kind of got the Venom suit and the suit that his son wears. But what ends up happening here is all these holes start popping up in this area. And initially Richard, right, the son of Peter, starts asking questions. Like he literally talks to his suit, like, what's going on here? Can you figure out what's happening? And his suit doesn't immediately recognize it, right? He says it's multiplying. And he says, hold on, I'm trying to analyze the energy signature. It appears the energy is organic in nature. And in that moment, they're met with the Ultimate Universe version of Spot. Now, it is important to specify, this is the first time we've seen him. So there is no backstory here. There's no real general understanding of what's happening. Instead, he talks about the idea of how the box worked. And then he kind of talks about Tony Stark going to screw himself. Now, for those of you guys who are not reading the current Ultimate Universe in Marvel, what Spot's referring to is that because the Maker had traveled to this universe and basically changed history, screwed things up so that things are not the way they're supposed to be, that Tony Stark had created a series of boxes, almost like gift boxes. And what these were designed to do was essentially fast track the characters. So where the Maker had killed the radioactive spider that was supposed to bite Spider-Man in this universe, and so Peter never became Spider-Man, Tony Stark ended up sending a box to Peter when he was an adult. And that box had the radioactive spider, and it had a Picotech suit, which bonds itself to Peter and basically gives him his abilities. Now, of course, that's the suit that Richard is currently wearing. Peter has his own suit here. But the fact is, right, it is a way to kind of fast track superheroes. The box that Spot has was actually not meant for him. It was meant for somebody else. But Spot took it, and now he's running around as a villain. And that's what's kind of cool, is because in response, Richard's suit says combat routines engaging, buckle up, kid. Now, the reason why it says that is because in the Spider-Man comics, the suit is tasked with protecting Richard. So it does what it can to keep Richard safe while also allowing Richard to kind of operate on his own to a degree to understand how to become a superhero and not get himself killed. But in the midst of this fight, because they've never encountered anyone like Spot before, Miles shows up. Now, Miles Morales has faced Spot multiple times, and Miles knows pretty much how to deal with his character. There is a bit of randomness in terms of the portals opening, different things like that, but the fact is, right, Miles is able to overcome him quite readily using a Venom Blast Punch, right? And then, of course, they web up Spot, they essentially trap him there, and then at that point, there's a bit of a conversation, and they're kind of greeting each other for the first time, right? Peter and Richard in this universe have never encountered any other Spider-Man besides themselves, so they're not overly familiar with the idea of the multiverse, and so for them, a lot of this is brand new. What's really awesome about this is that Richard is obsessed with Miles. Peter just starts talking. He's like, so you're from an alternate universe. He's like, and I'm a Spider-Man there too, so it's basically the same. And the response of Miles, kind of, right? You know, the sky's way less crowded here. And so he asks, like, you've only really been Spider-Man for a year and a half? And the response of Richard, I mean, it only started for me a few months ago, but yeah, like, is there another version of me? And that's where Miles tells him, I mean, there's a Venom, but I don't really know much about the guy. Right now, here's a cool thing too, for those of you guys who are not following the Ultimate Universe. When the reference is made that Peter's only been Spider-Man for a year and a half, that's real time. One of the coolest things about the Ultimate Universe in Marvel is that it follows in real time. So from the time that I'm recording this video right now, a year and a half ago is when Peter first became Spider-Man, give or take a little bit, right? Richard just became Venom a couple months ago in real time. It's really awesome. If you guys haven't read it, it's phenomenal. But the fact is, they kind of team up here. That Miles tells them, look, I get this is all new for you. Trust me, the multiverse gets old really fast, but I'm looking for my sister. She's just a kid. So can we focus on the here and now? And so at that point, they all kind of go on the hunt. Again, Richard is super obsessed with Miles, right? So he's like, can you believe how cool he is? And Peter's a little, pissy about the fact that his son thinks that Miles is cooler than he is. What dad wouldn't? But it kind of continues on. While all this is happening though, Spot is trying to free himself, right? He's trying to break out. But Miles also kind of fills them in a little bit on how the idea of Spider-Man works, at least in relation to his universe. Because Richard says, man, like he makes it look effortless. And of course, Peter responds that it probably just comes with experience. But Richard says, but he sounds like my age, younger than you for sure. Peter chimes in and he just asks a guy, right? right? Have you seen like this little kid roaming around here? And the guy's like, look, I'm not really interested in any of that, because people in the Ultimate Universe kind of seem to be jerks. That's the indication that seems to be given off by some of the writers that we've seen so far. But again, it's kind of this back and forth, right? He's so young. It's crazy that he's such a capable Spider-Man. What's so interesting about this is that if you're familiar with the original Ultimate Universe and the original version of Peter Parker in the Ultimate Universe, a lot of these statements are similar, right? You're so young. How are you so capable? How can you be a superhero? You need more experience. All those little things kind of come together in order to tell that narrative of Peter in the original Ultimate Universe. But again, nothing's really doing here on the hunt for Miles Morales' sister. And at the end of the day, it all kind of pops off when Spot escapes again. Now, this version of Spot probably looks very familiar to you in terms of the things he says. Of course, he's very reminiscent of the Spider-Verse films. No doubt that's the reason why his character has the kind of mannerisms he does in order to kind of bridge that gap of familiarity between the movies and the comics. But again, this guy's overcome by Miles Morales specifically, but at that point, you switch to the Council of the Maker. Now again, a little explanation here for this council if you're not reading the Ultimate Universe. The general gist behind this is that when the Maker came to this universe and started screwing everything up, he formed what was basically the Illuminati, right? A group that could essentially rule in his stead while he's off doing whatever it is he's doing. Now, because of how Ultimate Invasion ended, the Maker's locked in his dome, right, where time passes differently, and he comes out here in about 6 months. So the council is ruling in his stead. But as each individual is told about what's going on, that there's been a dimensional incursion of some kind, that there's actually been 2, that there's a spider hero, a trickster, a climber, falling finally always, and Spider's sister, opener of ways, basically a reference to the sister of Miles, the Hulk being told, Great Gray One, this is city technology, the unmistakable teleportation signature of the Maker himself. The question they have is, could he have escaped? Is he coming back? Or is it some great weapon or agent or something like that? And so ultimately they all kind of agree on the same thing, albeit in different locations, specifically Colossus Omega Red and his sister Ileana, who again, we still haven't seen a lot of their backstory, but are kind of like twisted evil versions of the X-Men that we're traditionally aware of, that they all want that power for themselves. And then at that point, you switch to the Ultimates, and again, the Maker's signature. And Doom in this reality, who again is basically Reed Richards, that he says it's not the Maker. And the question is like, I mean, how do you know it's not the Maker? And it's like, chiefly, because we're all still alive. The reality is that if it really was the Maker, the first thing he would do is try to kill us all. He's smart enough to know that this is something that we would do, right? Operating just fairly far into the future, away from the current time stream of what's happening in the new Ultimate Universe, but like, he would come for us in some capacity. And so what they end up doing is just sending a couple of their own members to go investigate it. The rest of the Ultimates don't really show up. Now, of course, the reason for that is, again, in the main Ultimate Universe, they're trying to expand the Ultimate teams out. They're trying to recruit new members. So they've got bigger things to focus on besides some kind of time-based incursion in the city of Manhattan. Not only that, Peter and Richard end up learning about the powers of Miles, that he has his Venom Blast, that he can make himself invisible. All these things seem fairly new to them, right? A whole different experience. But then at that point, Peter chimes in and says, look, it's been hours. If she were in the area, we'd have found her. So why don't you come crash at our place and we can start fresh in the morning? But at that point, Miles freaks out, right? That's my sister. She's 11 months old and doesn't know a single person in this universe. You guys can do you if you want to, but I'm not going to stop until I find Billie. Not for anything. And of course, where they kind of chime in and try to interject, the response of Miles, I'm good, right? Seriously, I have this. And so ultimately, Peter's just kind of like, all right, I mean, I don't really like it, but okay. Right? We'll check on you tomorrow. And of course, Richard wants to stay, right? But ultimately it's a school night, which means he has to go home, which kind of sucks for him. And so you kind of pick back up with Miles while he's back on the hunt. And he says, just to be safe, I searched in camouflage mode for a while. And Spider Dad was right about one thing. So much of what's going on in this universe is so foreign to him. And it's so strange. He says, I swing over to Brooklyn and I try not to freak out. I check out our address. It's the only place that Billie knows. I thought maybe that she found her way back home. I know that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but what else do I have? And then he says, nothing, right? I've got nothing. No Billie. It's not even the same building. It's some other family living in some other apartment. Do we not even exist here? Now, that's kind of a reverse of what happened at the end of Spider-Man. After Peter and Miles met and their adventure was over and everything, Peter came back to the main Marvel universe and then found himself asking the question, is there a Miles Morales here? It was a really awesome cliffhanger for the story. But Miles kind of continues on, right? He says, I swing around my neighborhood for a while, but it's not my neighborhood, not my world. From high up, it looks the same, but up close, it's all different. And so while he's standing there talking about the idea of trying to find his sister, he's suddenly grabbed by a giant hand, only to be met by Wasp and Hank Pym. And the question they ask here, are you here to destroy the world or to save it? Because keep in mind, one of the on-running themes in the Ultimate Universe right now is that the forces of the Maker will emerge. And when they do, there's no knowing what actually happens. Quite literally, no one knows what's going to happen, if everyone's going to die or if everyone's going to live. The Guardians of the Galaxy came from the future. They're not even 100% sure if what they saw with the deaths of the Ultimates is actually going to happen. So again, this is cool because it's kind of bringing Miles into this new universe. I'm excited to see where it goes. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.